Hey, this is Dan. Welcome to the Spiritual Underground Podcast, coming to you from DTM Enterprises, my little wood shop in my backyard. We're set up here, and I frankly tell you, we're doing a double header today, and I just love doing these things. It really warms my heart to sit and listen one-on-one to somebody tell me their story of recovering through here. So if you're new to this podcast, this is primarily a 12-step based podcast, 12-step recovery. We talk about other things here too. Had a recovery. Actually, today's episode that come out was a guy who lost a tremendous amount of weight. Was some over 250 pounds in 14 months, and in that he also quit nicotine. And so that's kind of a neat story, and it didn't have anything to do with drugs or alcohol, but it was a man's story of recovering himself in a different way. And I do like to explore different avenues of recovery. They're all interesting to me, and I learn something every time I listen. I want to talk about DTM. www.net. That's my little wood shop handyman business. If you're in the Louisville metropolitan area, you can contact me through that. Spiritualunderground.org is the podcast or the website that supports this podcast. You can go there and see pictures of the guests if they choose to allow me to post a picture, and links to the podcast are there. Podcast can be found on all the major platforms: Google Play, Apple, Spotify, Pandora. You can find it just about every place. 12-Step Spiritual Recovery is a book by James Christopher Cone. You can find that on Amazon. It is a 12-step manual, little updated information in there, and it is geared to people who do not fit in a typical 12-step fellowships. It's a way to get a hold of these tools no matter where you are in life. The music around this podcast is by Darren Frank, and I'm going to have to turn off that fan on that heater. Darren's doing well, and people are seeing him. Just keep him in your prayers as he recovers from this health issue he's got going on. Today's guest and I will take 1 second. I can actually clean that out, but the up and down part of it bugs me. I have an app that if I record some ambient noise, I can actually tell this program to listen to that noise and take it out. Oh, okay. So like when I'm running the air conditioner or something, I can do that. Today's guest is another one that, I'm on the stretch of these people that I'm getting to meet as they come up my driveway. And that's kind of exciting. I like, in the beginning, most of these podcasts, I'd harnessed my friends to come and be on it. And they're now getting their friends to come. And, it always sends like a web out in a different direction, because people who don't know you will listen and know your story now, and your friends might listen, and they might know somebody else's and listen to somebody else's story and know that person a little better. So that's neat to me. Mike is our guest today, and he's frankly, he come to me through we call him Boom Boom. Brian L. You've heard him in here. He sent a few guests my way, and he always sends some magic. Brad G. was here a few weeks ago, and I didn't know him, and we just had a great time sitting here getting to know each other. And he's a really fun guy. So how you doing today, Mike?
Well, I'm doing pretty good for an old guy.
Yeah, nice day. After those couple gloomy, rainy days we've had lately, I like that sunshine that's going on out there today.
Me too. I'm moved into the area from Indianapolis some months ago, and Indianapolis, most people don't know, has less days of sunshine than Seattle does.
Really?
So, I just love, and it lifts my spirit being around all this sunshine.
Yeah. I'm starting to feel like spring already almost. We know we got a couple months of still some cold weather, but it'll be here, and heck, I like every season. I don't have any.
We'll get challenged, I'm sure.
Yeah. So we'll start off like we always do with a very important date. We'll talk about what is your sobriety date?
September 7th, 1985.
1985. So that is 35 years ago?
34.
34.
Yeah.
Because we've got to get to September before it gets there. Yeah. Cool. That's quite a while back. I graduated high school in 87.
Okay.
I've always put some kind of meter about where that's at in my life. So we normally talk about, this is a typical deal. We talk about how we grew up. I like to hear where a guy was born and raised, how his family, how his upbringing was. I think there's a connection there usually that I find that where we, looking back in hindsight, we can see where we had this spiritual malady and how our spirit got stepped on as we grew up. And I don't think it's necessarily a cause and effect thing, but there certainly is some correlation as I sit here listening to stories about events in people's lives that sometimes could be categorized as trauma, where things happen. I think if you go through a divorce with your parents, and you're young, there's a certain amount of trauma you experience through those kind of events. So I will turn the microphone over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks. I grew up in a university town in Iowa City, Iowa, Big Ten university town. And when I grew up there in the 50s, it was university was about 25,000 students. It's much bigger now, and the town was about 50,000 people, and it's much bigger now. But it was a great place to grow up. All the neighbors knew each other and watched each other's kids, and the mayor lived next door, and the police chief lived down the block, and the sheriff lived around another corner, and my folks played bridge with pretty much all of them. And
bridge. My mom was a huge bridge fan.
Yeah, and so forth. So my first drug I got hooked on was the drug of approval, and because I was a kid you wouldn't like, I would suck up to all the teachers and try and do all the right stuff. And if you made the mistake, ask me over to your place for dinner, for example, I'd jump up as soon as the meal was over, and I'd grab plates off the table and take them in the kitchen and start rinsing them off. And, and pretty soon I'd get your mom to say, "Jimmy, why can't you be like that nice Lorenz boy?" And, I don't know why I thought I needed that, because I come from an intact family. But the disease of self-centeredness was on me from the get-go. It's still a family legend about my resentment. I'm the oldest of 4 children, and how I was upset when my sister was born. I was 3 years old. They asked me what I wanted for Christmas that year, and I said, "Send her back." And as it unfolded years later, my primary amends to my siblings and my family was the fact that I just was a kid that sucked all the oxygen out of the room.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, we didn't have any alcoholism in the immediate family, and I didn't know till years later that my father was probably an untreated Al-Anon. He, in the middle of the Depression, when he was 15 years old, his paternal grandfather died, his paternal grandmother died, and he was sent to live with his grandpa, who was apparently a raging alcoholic. And my Dad's job at 15 was to try and manage this adult alcoholic. And saw that later. It made sense when I looked at the difference between his reaction to my drinking and my mother's reaction to it.
Yeah. So that'd be your great-great-grandfather, if it was his granddad.
Yeah.
So a little ways up the line.
Yeah.
But no other... You don't have much alcoholism in and around you, huh?
And finally, I've got a nephew that's 10 years sober now.
Oh, really? Cool.
Coming up on 11, and that's pretty much all we've got in the immediate family.
Huh. That's pretty interesting because most people sit and, most people can point to a relative that's closer up the line than that.
Well, it's one of the reasons I questioned whether I belonged at various times.
Yeah.
And part of my amends to my family actually was, and I might as well mention it now, is that I invented an entire dysfunctional family that never existed in order to justify. I thought I needed that to justify my seat in Alcoholics Anonymous, and told a lot of lies about people that did nothing but try and help me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of fancied or real.
Yeah, there you go.
Fancied up some stuff.
Well, my MO is, if I can't pack the gear, I'm going to come up with a good story why it's my fault that I don't. That's something that emerged with me about spiritual matters. I had all kinds of stories about that, but the truth has been revealed to me in sober life was that I was a kid that I begged both my grandmothers. One of them was a Baptist and the other one was Catholic. And I begged them both to take me to church. I loved it. I hung out with it and everything else. And the short version is that when I got old enough that I started to want to do a few things that didn't seem to match up with what I was hearing in church, I couldn't just say I'm going to walk away or I differ from you. I had to make up a story about that. You scared me. You were mean to me. All of this other stuff. The fact is that I had a couple of religious people that were very kind and tried to mentor me in early years, and I had a chance to make amends to one of them, but the other one was long gone by the time I got sober. But that's kind of the story of my life. I squirt a lot of ink in the water so you can't see what Mike's up to.
So we'll just move on down the pike, and you can,
okay.
Let me know.
Well, when I was about 11 years old, I didn't understand it as such at the time, but what was explained to me later was a spiritual awakening of sorts, and I got a hold of enough vodka that it had a real effect on me. And all of a sudden, I wasn't interested in your approval anymore. And my parents thought there'd been a demon possession in the house.
Oh, really?
The kid that brought home the good grades and cared about everybody being happy with him, all of a sudden, I'm giving them all the finger and all of that. Now, being the times being what they were, I couldn't drink as often as I wanted to until I got a little older. But maybe I usually I was under the misapprehension that I drank normally till sometime in my late 20s, and then things just kind of went off the rails and went bad. But the truth is that a couple examples. I'm 16, just got a driver's license. I'm riding around with a buddy and a couple of 6-packs of beer outside that little university town, and the local sheriff's deputy pulled me over. He saw the light go on and pulled off the side of the road and turned my buddy in the car and said, "Hey, watch this." Got out of the car, go back, and I'm waving at the deputy because this little town, he knows me, he knows my folks, I know him, everything. So I smile and start walking to each other, and when I got close to him, I grabbed him and I smashed him down across the hood of his cruiser and took his gun away from him. And he was pissed.
Yeah, I bet.
And he sputtered and this and that and the other thing, and then I turned around and handed it back to him. And he was really upset then, and he cursed and sputtered and this and that and took our beer and poured it out. But at the end of the day, he did what I thought he was going to do, which was turn us loose.
Yeah.
Because there's no way he's going back to write me up and take me back to the substation and have to listen to his buddies for the rest of his career, kid him about the kid who took his gun away. That ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And even more important was that my buddy was watching all this go down out of the back window of my car. And, if you don't think you're enough, you need all that street cred that you can
right.
get. So
yeah. And that's a bunch right there.
Yeah, the story was all over my high school, of course, the next day.
I'll bet.
And I got to be somebody for a little while.
Right.
Now, I don't know why I needed that, but I thought I did.
So did you was that almost like a spur of the moment thing, or was that the plan to do that?
No, I'm improvising as I go along. My intention was to drink that beer that night and get more than my share, and I had an opportunity. What can we do with this?
Yeah. Today that'd get you killed.
Oh yeah. Old Frank J. who was a Rampart guy out of L.A. That I met in later years in recovery. Frank says, "You're damn lucky that wasn't me in that car."
Yeah.
And so anyway, so that's one little vignette from the time, and then guessing about a year later, we had another tragedy around our house, and my father, instead of buying me the Corvette that I thought I was entitled to, went out and bought my mother a new car. And I thought that was awful. And he not only got her a new car, he got about the lamest car he could have found. He bought her a new Buick. There were big boats in those days, and it was that kind of senior citizen tan that you see. And I was enraged. And my mother, who reacted differently than my dad, my mom was always sometimes kind of a co-conspirator. But after a couple of weeks, she says, I know you're unhappy about it, but look, here are the keys to my car. It's a new car. It's a nice car. Why don't you take it on your date tonight? And, I know it's not what you want, but maybe it'll be better than what you got. And I said, okay. And I took the car and went on the date, and sure enough, I don't remember what happened on the date really, but later that night I ran into some buddies, and we ended up down at old Buck's machine shop. And Buck was a World War II veteran, later became a member of our fellowship. And Buck's son was my drinking buddy, and so we were down there drinking in the shop and complaining and everything else, and one of my, quotes, friends fired up a cutting torch and put it in my hand. He says, Lorenz, he says, you aren't going to get that Corvette, but you could have a convertible. So I proceeded to cut the top off my car. Yeah. And the next morning, my parents bring the other kids out, and they're all dressed up. They're going to take them to church, and they come out in the garage, and there's the smoking hulk of Mom's car with Big Brother laid out naked across the front seat.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I don't have much memory of that, except I remember hearing my mother yell, "Don't hit him, Art, don't hit him." And so...
that is amazing.
Yeah. Now, in retrospect, I understand with my dad's background how utterly frustrated. It frustrated a normal human being.
Yeah.
But with his Al-Anon background, untreated, I'm sure that was a terrible, terrible, wrenching thing to him. And it just slid off my back at the time.
Yeah.
So these are the years that it was pointed out to me that I considered my normal drinking years.
Normal.
And I was just having a good time, and you didn't understand and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So that was an awakening for me.
Yeah. When it felt like it was working.
Yeah.
And I suppose it is.
Yeah.
It did.
Compared to the alternative, sure.
Yeah.
So.
Did you, where'd you go to high school, out there?
Yeah, I went to high school there. Later on, the University of Iowa. I made a drastic mistake.
So did you graduate from high school and went to the college locally?
Yes, to the university there. And I made a mistake in my sophomore year. I went on spring break. It was the spring of 1966, and I enjoyed spring break so much that I didn't come back and take my midterms. And all of a sudden, I had an encounter with Uncle Sam that I couldn't avoid or talk my way out of.
Oh, really?
So I found myself in the Army, and eventually, after a series of adventures, on my way to Vietnam. So the odd thing for most folks is that Vietnam, prior to recovery, was one of my most. I was sober there more than about any place else.
Oh, really? Yeah. Dangerous place not to be drunk or to be loaded.
Yeah, I mean, and I had friends that had different experiences, but I spent most of my time running an infantry platoon down in the Mekong Delta, and lots of booby traps and so forth, and that's where I kind of came to understand peer pressure, because if you've got armed people and you're responsible for part of their security, they get real upset if you're loaded. Or if you put the artillery and the airstrike in the wrong place, they get upset.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So, almost call it scared straight.
Yeah. How long were you there?
I was there for a little over a year. I extended my tour there simply because I knew I couldn't return to the stateside Army and getting up and saluting the flag every morning and all that kind of stuff. In the combat world there, as long as we did our job, there weren't many rules about how we did it and so forth, and polishing boots and doing all the other stuff. So I knew I was going to be in trouble coming back to the States with that attitude, so I stayed long enough. They had a rule: if you could get within three months of your time of separation, that they just discharge you when you got back, and I did that. Yeah.
Come home and got out.
Yep.
Think you carried anything home from Vietnam? There's a lot of stigma out there about like that having, it really changed some men's lives. And
I'm sure it. I'm trying to measure my words here because over the years I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of people that have had various combat experience. I came back. I was fortunate. One of the guys that helped me early on, I was talking to him. I says, Don, I was kind of a big fish in a small pond. I had all these decorations. My picture was in the local newspaper a number of times, and with stuff like gallantry and heroism and whatever attached to it. And I said, Don, why is it that I got all these medals and I got to tell you, I've never felt brave a second. And he says, well, explain that to me. And I did. And he gave me an answer that really changed my life. He says, you were never brave. He says, you were just afraid that somebody would think you're a coward. So you would run at somebody with a machine gun who was, when you were wounded, because you were afraid somebody would think you're a coward. He says, that's not fear, that's terror. And I got that, and that settled it down. Now, what what my experience was for me personally, and I've seen it with the number of people that I've worked with, was one of my best games when I came back for getting out of stuff with, well, I could get you to go, well, if you'd been where he'd been and done what he'd done and been through all the stuff he's been, you'd be a little crazy too. So just give him a break. And I worked that. Mm. Now there are people that, fellow veterans that had trauma and had different reactions to it and experiences with it. Mine was that I couldn't get and stay sober and be permanent in recovery till I put that aside. Mm. As long as I wanted to be a special case because of my war experience, that didn't seem to work for me.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had some. Well, my ex-father-in-law was a veteran, and also he had, so he brought some buddies around, and I've had some experience in, varying. And I also remember when I was a kid, I had a friend, a really good friend, who actually is the first one that introduced me to marijuana. His stepdad was like a stereotypical thing. And it set. Well, I should say that it set some kind of stereotypical thing in my head. It's not real, but he was very short-tempered. He sat and he drank and watched TV, and when you had to go through the house in that room, you tried to be like invisible.
Yeah.
As you moved through there, because you had to go through the living room to get to my buddy's bedroom, and you went through there very quietly and with as little interruption as possible, or else hell broke loose. And that set a mental thing, because it attached that same Vietnam thing to him.
Yeah.
And it set this. Well, if you did that, then you're that.
Right.
Not true, but
yeah, there isn't one experience.
Yeah, right.
There are a lot of different experiences filtered through a lot of different personalities. So
yeah. And when you're young like that, you'll get those impressions, and there's somehow another stick hard, where you're not able to like process it this is just one case.
Yeah.
So when you come home, did you turn it loose then when you got home and be able to drink freely and didn't have to worry about the?
Oh yeah. And
how old would you been? Like
I was
21, 2?
No, I went in just before my 20th birthday. I was in 3 years. So,
okay.
I was essentially 23.
23 when you came home.
Yeah, I got out. So I came back and I started trying to fit in and I thought and went back to school, went to work for a family business, and I was of course my drinking ramped up. I told you I'm hiding behind the excuses there. I'm stealing from the family business. I'm all this dishonesty going on, and I finally decided I got to get out of Dodge. And who knew? I ended up going to work for a company that sent me to Louisville, Kentucky for training in September of 1973 down here. So I had a couple years of taste of Louisville before I actually moved here this time.
Yeah.
And so forth. So I was not a nice guy around Louisville either. I kind of fell upstairs in that company, and about one of the worst things that can happen to an alcoholic is I started making a lot of money, and without a lot of supervision or responsibility.
Yeah.
And
that's another place you can hide, behind it. Hey, look, I'm successful.
Yeah.
So,
hey, I'm on my way to Aspen to go skiing,
Yeah.
and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Yeah. And so forth. And
I'm going to grab a bottle of water or something to drink. Do you want a bottle of water or something?
yeah, I'm about done with the coffee here.
You want it cold or room temperature?
Doesn't matter. Whatever you got.
I got both. Sometimes I don't want it cold. I don't know why. I'm gonna drink that here. So you said you had to get out of Dodge.
Yeah. Well,
where did you end up? Did you move?
Well, I ended up moving. Yeah, I got serious about looking for a job outside the family business. And
what was the family business?
Family business was a gourmet food business.
Oh yeah,
yeah. We were kind of on the front edge of that at that time. And so anyway, I ended up coming to Louisville to work for a company that's no longer there. It's the old Enro shirt company down there. And
rings a bell.
Yeah, I lived in the Imperial House. They had a company apartment there, and I lived in there. And the funny thing is, I can stand in my backyard today and see where I lived 40-some years ago.
Wow!
And it's a much different life today.
Yeah.
So, I mean, with the money I went through there, I was eventually ended up in Indianapolis and proceeded to do what I bought myself the right kind of house on the right street and old Tudor, lead glass windows, slate roof. I mean, I've got, it's my stage dressing for there. And I had a friend out in L.A. who described my reaction perfectly. He said he had a house in Beverly Hills, and he said, I'd come home and every night I'd be sort of afraid that the real owner was going to come along and tell me to leave. My name was on the deed, but I didn't really feel like it was mine. It was part of a stage set.
Yeah.
So what happens with that is inevitably I finally you go up as far as you can go and then you start going down, and you live off your reputation, and you try and use money and other things to keep people at bay. But eventually I crashed. The house is gone. The car is gone. And I'm living with a gal. The truth was I was living off of her. And, I wasn't raised to do that. And we played a game. I didn't know it at the time, but we kept playing a game that I was going to, occasionally I'd fly into New York and I'd have a job interview, and Mike was going to be back in the saddle again, and the big time was going to be here all over again. And this was just a little bump on the road and all that kind of stuff. And that wasn't happening. And eventually it devolved down to really kind of my first experience with one day at a time living. It went like this. She got up and went to work because she had a good job. And I got up whenever I could get up, and I had to go out in the kitchen of that apartment and make myself a drink and carry it into the bathroom, and I'd sit on the edge of the tub by the toilet and try and get the first drink to stay down, because I wasn't going to be able to get dressed until I got that first drink in me. And so then I'd eventually get going, and she'd come home at night after work, and she'd put her car in the carport, and she'd start to come in the house. Then she'd take her purse, take her money and stuff, and put it under the carpet in the trunk of her car, and she'd leave some money for me to steal in her purse.
Uh-huh.
And she'd come in, and we'd have something to eat and might watch a TV show, and then she'd go to bed because she had a job to get up for. And I'd eventually, once I thought she was asleep, I'd reach in her purse and take that money, and I'd head out the back door and down to one of the bars, and one day at a time. That's how that rolled.
Yeah, I can relate with that too.
And eventually, I kind of get a sense that she's, you know how we do, that I'm playing out my string here. So I tell her that, you know, I'm going to try and get sober again. Yeah, because I've tried a few treatment centers. I've been, when I had insurance and people cared, I was going to nice, expensive ones, and, you know, kind of down the hill. Well, there isn't any insurance or any money left, so I'm headed for the VA now.
Yeah.
And I'm confused enough. I'm living in Indianapolis, but the only VA I can get my mind around is in the middle of Iowa, about a 4.5, 5 hour drive. So she bought me a pint of Bacardi rum, gave me $20 and filled up my tank with gas and said, you know,
find it.
Good luck, you know. So I headed out in my old beater car to get sober.
In Iowa.
And there'd been a veterans treatment center near Des Moines that I'd been told about over the years. And I mentioned at the top the old boy Buck, whose machine shop I'd worked on Mom's car in. It was around Labor Day, and, you know, some of that hot, humid heat we get sometimes get that time of year. And of course, I got a drunk car, so the air conditioning isn't working. And I run out of the rum and so forth. And I'm not to that treatment center yet. I'm about 100 miles short. And where I am is I'm on I-80 near my old hometown. And by this time, my dad's dead. My mom still lives in that town. And I got two of my brothers that still live there. And this is another one of those seconds and inches things for me, because I know today that if I'd pulled off there and gone to Mom's house, I could have gotten Mom to write another check. But instead, I took the exit and went over to Buck's house. And Buck and his wife had gotten sober about 7 years before. I thought, you know, I wasn't happy with that. Buck was the guy that when I was in the Army would send me, I'd get a letter from Buck with a little note and $20 bill the week before payday, and he'd say, "Hey, partner, you know, I'm sure you're broke by now. Here, have a few on me." Well, my good old buddy he's sober now. I thought I think about the nicest thing I called him was church puppies.
Yeah.
So here I am, I'm dying. I can't make the last 100 miles of treatment center, and I'm on Buck's doorstep, and I'm knocking on the door. And Buck and his wife Nettie come to the door, and they look at me, and then they look at each other, and then they reached out and just pulled me into their living room. And they put their arms around me there and said a prayer.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, if it had been a day or two earlier and they'd tried to say a prayer over me, I would have shoved them away. But I stood still for the prayer. And then Buck was a practical man. He gave me a drink and put me to bed in the spare bedroom. And next day got me up and gave me what to this point's been my last drink, and drove me that last 100 miles to that treatment center.
Wow, that's cool.
So that's the way that all rolled out. Yeah.
So how was the VA treatment center?
It was like all the others, essentially.
Was it?
I mean, you know, it's all bells and whistles with my experience in the different. I had a couple things, crucial encounters there that I'll tell you about. First one was when I was being evaluated in there. The psychologist who was evaluating me was smart enough to say, "Well, you know, Mike, you might not be an alcoholic. We've got this new thing we're looking at called this PTSD stuff, and you could be one of those guys. I'm looking at your record here, and you could well be one of those guys. And they put me in the PTSD ward, and inside 4 hours, I understood I didn't belong there. These weren't my people. And I became my alcoholic. If that hadn't happened, I might I don't know what it would have taken to convince me, because anything I could hang on to protect my drinking, my alcoholism,
Right.
I was going to hang on to. The other great 12-step thing that happened there was I was bad enough shape physically. I'm going to start coughing here.
Do you need something? It's okay.
Give me a second to recover here.
The one thing I say about this podcast is I do not do a sanitized podcast. This is how things happen. It's the way life is. You cough once in a while. Your guy has to get up and go pee. Things happen. So I do not worry about it.
Okay. Well, good enough. I didn't want to blow anybody's ears out there.
Yeah.
In any event, I was sick enough when I got there that I had to be hospitalized seriously for a while. And a little guy orderly in a pair of gray scrubs, I still remember the gray scrubs, came in with a clipboard, and he just said, "Mister, they tell me there's a good chance you're not going to make it. Where would you like your effects sent?" And he had no plea to get sober, quit drinking, do anything like that, just the straight on truth. And that made an impression.
Yeah.
So while I was there, I had to consider, okay, so you've been dried out before. What's going to be different about this time? And the thing I could come up with is I'd never really been a full-on member of 100%. I've been more of like a social member of AA. I hadn't really become part of the club, if you will.
Yep.
And so my resolution there was that if I survived all this, I was going to go and give AA a real try.
Mm.
And so I eventually, I got out of the treatment center. By the way, the family that I badmouthed, my brother that I had nothing nice to say about, rode a 125cc Suzuki 100 miles each way to visit me every weekend. That rotten brother of mine. And so the lie, it wasn't so much that I found the truth, is that the lies quit working and they fell apart. And I got out of there and I went back like every big time guy, and I'm living in my old bedroom at Mommy's. And my youngest brother at that time had just started his career, which he's still successful in today, as a wine distributor. And my old bedroom was his first warehouse.
Yeah.
So my first night out of treatment, they got to push the cases of wine back against the walls and put a rollaway bed in here. And I'm sleeping with wine stacked to the ceiling on three sides of me there. And see, that's the miracle. I'm safe and protected because of the surrender that had happened.
Right.
Got back to Indianapolis. I got into what I'd call my junior guru phase in AA. I'm going to 11 meetings a week, which was about the max possible then, between the candlelight meetings, the noon meetings, the regular meetings, all that kind of stuff. And inside 5 years, I get a new life develops. I meet and marry a gal. I got a 1.5-year-old stepson. I've got a new career. I'm back living on the cul-de-sac again. And as my 5th AA anniversary approaches, I mean, I never dreamed that if you told me I could be sober for 5 years, I would have, that would have been nirvana.
And January 1st was my 5 years.
Yeah.
That's what that big 5 in the window is.
So, congratulations. I hope you do better with it than I did.
Yeah, well, I'm listening.
Because, no, I mean, I like AA. I love the people there and everything else, but I'm dying inside because it's my secret, but this doesn't work for me. I see you getting freer and happier and everything else, and I get all the stuff that I thought I needed, and here I am. I'm more oriented towards suicide at this point than I was at the worst point of my drinking. Because as bad as things ever got drinking, I could always hold on to the illusion that, well, maybe someday you can get sober. And if you're sober, then all these people told me all the time, if you just didn't drink, I'd keep your engagement ring. If you just didn't drink, we'd promote you here.
Yeah.
And all that whole list that we got. And I got my whole wish list, and I'm dead inside.
And still wasn't enough.
And
didn't fill that spot.
Because what I'd done in AA was a lot like what I'd done years ago over at the University of Iowa. I went in the field house and I registered for my classes. I bought all my books. Then I took the books and threw them in the closet, joined a fraternity, and started partying. And if you ask me what I was doing, I'd say, well, sir, I'm a pre-law student here at the University of Iowa. And that's technically true, except I really wasn't in class much. And same thing, I didn't miss a conference. I didn't miss a meeting. I would grab every service position you'd throw out there for me. All this stuff. I'd make coffee for you. I'd do whatever you wanted to do. I just missed the program in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was what my home group we'd call a slogan slinger. You just need to turn that over, son.
Yep.
Now, if you back me up against the wall, say, okay, tell me exactly how I'm going to go turn that over, I couldn't have told you. But I'd hear things going to all those meetings, and I'd put them in my pocket, and I'd fire them back out at you at some point in time. And so here I was, further from a drink than I ever imagined possible, in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I'm dying.
Yeah, I've heard similar things.
Yeah. It's not uncommon, and so many of the guys I work with, when I go around, I get to travel a little bit, and I'll tell you, this is just my personal thing. I think the new guy or gal coming through the door, that's just wonderful and fine, but those aren't my people. My people are the people with 5, 10, 15, 20, and sometimes more years that are out there sitting in the meetings and conferences that are dying, and they can't tell anybody because they got too much time. They've got a reputation that they've got to defend and hold on to, and every now and then snag them. See, the danger, as I have observed it, for people with long-term sobriety is far more likely to be suicide than drinking. I mean, drinking can happen, or drug use can happen, but we already know that doesn't work.
Right.
We've proved that to ourselves, and so most places I go, I will hear, old Joe. He had 27 years, and he just parked his car in the garage and let it run.
Right, I've heard that too. Heard those stories too.
So on and so forth. So I'm on a mission to find those guys.
Yeah. Well, you really hit me and touched me, because when you said some things, you said like slogan slinger, and I can find myself doing that often. I also feel like I got some kind of reputation to protect. So you touched me with both of those phrases.
Yeah. Well, it's what it is. So I further from a drink than I imagined I could get. I had a guy that I didn't like very much save my life.
Yeah.
And so forth. So that's I don't know how far you want to go with this. But
Yeah. Tell me everything you want to tell me. I like to hear the whole story.
Okay. Well,
we don't have a time limit really.
Okay. Well, we don't.
Unless whatever time you need to leave.
No. Well, truncate some things a little bit here.
Sure.
But effectively, I got touched by a man who had still does. He's 55 years sober now. A great relation with the Steps in Recovery. Now, he was never my sponsor. He's become a friend over time, but he put me in contact with people that I didn't resent as much as I resented him at the time, and I got to have a new vision of this, and got to find out that really, at the end of the day, love's the most effective tool that we've got. That until I can make you believe that I care about you and have a real deep concern that, 12-stepping you isn't just another notch on my belt.
Yeah.
That we aren't going far. And that man, would tell me, he says, I love you, don't you, Mike? And he'd say things like, well, knowing that I love you, Mike, if there was any way I could tell you how to have a successful sick relationship, I'd do it. But since there isn't, I can't. And we went along through that, and he would hold my hand and lead me into another pieces of the truth. And he would have he lived in Denver, and I lived in Indianapolis, but he was a person who traveled a lot and had a business. So he'd say, I'm buying you a ticket with some airline miles, and I'd go out and I'd stay at his house for a period of time, and he said, I want you to see how a sane man and his family live and interact with each other. And my best memories, I'd watch he and his wife. If it was nice weather out there in Denver, they'd hold hands and walk through the neighborhood in the morning to start their day, and I'd trail along about 6 feet behind. And then if it was nasty weather, we'd go to the mall and watch the same thing repeated, and so forth. And so it was those things. He'd say, no matter how spiritual we could make any of this sound, it doesn't really have much value except for our ego unless we can take it to the street. So how are we going to use this spiritual conception to touch somebody and to help somebody rather than just inflate ourselves?
Yeah,
and that sort of thing. So it's I was really blessed and been blessed to encounter a lot of people along this trail, and he gave me the beginning of how to have a sane relationship, and how to be a decent guy. He said, Mike, if you really were a sociopath or a psychopath, there wouldn't be anything we could do for you. But he says, those are just an act you've been hiding behind. You do stuff that would fall into those categories, oddly enough. But he says the difference is when you do that, it breaks your own heart. And then you have to drink or do something else in order to heal it. Or now that you're sober, you got to buy something, you got to do something, and so forth. So that was kind of a short version of the turn that it was made here.
So 5 years in, you met a new teacher.
Yeah.
that changed your trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had, most importantly, I'd had people available to me a long time that it was my willingness coming together with their presence.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the best teacher in the world wouldn't help.
Nope.
If I was, as long as I was bunkered in behind my old ideas. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a similar experience, but it wasn't staying sober. It was bouncing around. My first 4 years in was periods of sobriety and white chips and red chips and blue chips and back to a white chip. And I did actually get a 1 year token in 2016, I guess. And I didn't drink for a year, but I dabbled in some other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I bounced off the walls and halls of AA for a few years of playing with it and not investing and thinking I can just have one. And then I got in a lot of trouble, And right after a little while after getting in a lot of trouble, I intersected with the right person at the right time. And that is affected my current sobriety date.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. So, well, look, if I'm taking it, we're probably about run out of time here, but even though we've got no time, but
Yeah.
If I can, I'd like to tell you a little bit of a story here to kind of maybe wrap it up for now.
Yeah. I have like I said, a lot of guys will go an hour and a half. A lot of guys, we don't necessarily like I said, we don't have a time limit except for when you need to leave. The last guy that told his story in here, he had a sponsor with him, it clocked out at 2 hours and 17 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't worry about it. That's one cool thing about this is that
I can't do that. I've got a friend out in Seattle that we call 212, and Brendan's got that nickname because they told him that when he was visiting Iceland with another friend of mine. They said, well, Brendan, you can just take all the time you need to tell your story tonight. And it was 212, and there are 212 sweatshirts out there.
Oh, are there?
Yeah, where'd you?
In Iceland, huh?
Yeah.
That what was that? What's the name of that? There's a town where a lot of speakers in the conference go. Yeah, I see that on the locations of speaker tapes a lot in conventions and big step studies and things like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's kind of one of the first big websites came out of there.
Right, XA speakers. Yeah.
Arner and the boys.
Yeah, so you know them, huh?
I know Arner a little bit. Yeah. Yes, I haven't been there. No.
Yeah, that's interesting because that was the first speaker tape library that I hit, and it's still my favorite. And I still, when I get new guys and they're sitting around and they're twiddling their thumbs and trying to figure out what to do with their time except for drink.
Yeah.
Because I'm not drinking now. What do I do?
Yeah.
Here, listen to this, and I send them links.
Yeah.
I joke around about DTM Enterprises. That's Dan the Man.
Oh, okay.
and I really do say DTM Woodwork. That's what I call this.
Sure.
And so DTM Enterprises also has a speaker tape service where if you send me a text, I will send you a good speaker tape.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of jokey, but it's real too.
Yeah.
And I do quite a bit of that, of dropping those. I got some favorites, and I know that it will entertain them too, along with carrying the message. Absolutely. So they'll stick with it because it's entertaining. Yeah. And then that's where most of them come from is XA.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Well, I uploaded a lot of stuff from some friends and stuff over there. Now, XA had a big clean out some years back.
Oh, did it?
Well, they were on the cusp of being sued by somebody who bought a tape library on the East Coast. I'm trying to keep this very general.
Yeah.
And so they, rather than fight them in court, they took a lot of stuff out and took it down.
Really?
It was once there, they claimed that
they're mine.
Yes, kind of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I always, conceptually, I struggle with that mine thing, that this is mine. This is my wife. Do you own her? My kids, my property. How did I get this piece of dirt in that line right there in the dirt? On one side of it's mine, one side of it's yours.
Yeah, there's usually a lot of pain coming behind that word.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So what do you got? What do you look like
one of the things I do, I was taught to do by my mentors is that, it's useless to tell people what to do if you don't get them into the why should I care about this and why should I do it thing.
Yeah, I like that.
So I'm going to give you a direct example of where I got a real first step that I could keep, and it was oddly enough writing a piece of what we call conduct inventory or sex inventory, whichever way you want to go. And this was regarding my college sweetheart, and I loved this gal like a rainbow. I went hunting and fishing with her daddy and her brothers. She was from a big Catholic family, and I loved all of them. And as much as I loved her, I wanted to be part of that family, not just her. And so here's what I did. Ellen, where was I selfish? I wanted to enjoy sex with her regardless of the consequences. I was dishonest. I told her not to worry, that I'd always be there for her, no matter what. I dishonestly refused to consider my willingness and ability to keep that promise. I was inconsiderate. I gave scant consideration to the consequences of my behavior to her, her family, her faith, her reputation, and her career. I aroused jealousy. I told her if she didn't have sex with me, that I'd get it elsewhere. Paid undue attention to other women in her presence and let her know how attractive I found them. Often spent time alone with other women. She found me at Holly's apartment. Bad night. Bitterness. When she became pregnant, because I eventually wore her down, I told her that I doubted it was my child. I told her mother I was too young to get married and didn't want to marry her anyway. And when she was in California having our baby, I made drunken calls to harangue her. I abandoned her and our child. And because in those days communications were different, I told all the local people that she'd run out on me. And, was she pregnant? Well, maybe she was cheating on me, Who did I harm? The baby, obviously, Ellen, her family, my family, our friends. What should I have done instead? Well, Don said almost anything would be an improvement. But this was key, too, because it was opened up. One of the things that Don, and the Don I'm talking about here was Don P. from Colorado. One of the things Don always told me, he says, Mike, he says, God's not going to change you against your will. He's the God I understand is a God of informed consent. So if you write an ideal here, you let God know what you'd like to be if he'd be willing to change you that way. And so this was the first of a series of those things that I've written over the years. And I always have my current ideal for my sex conduct and my ideal for my relationship now with my wife in my pocket and my billfold at all times here. So said I should have treated sex as the sacred gift that it is. I shouldn't have engaged in behavior that I wasn't willing to be responsible for. I should have honestly faced the consequences of my actions. I should have been honest with myself and others. My harms were all rooted in dishonesty, particularly about how afraid I was. And then here is, I didn't know it at the time that way, but here is a bit of a spiritual awakening. Self-reliance will always produce fear and pain. And
self-reliance will always
produce
fear and pain.
And so I say I got a first step here because, see, I understood powerlessness in a new way here, because I knew if there'd been any way I could have treated her differently, I would have. And I understood what being driven by fear and driven by, it wasn't solely by drink, because there were periods of sobriety in there, or non-drunkenness anyway. But yet I was willing to betray all these people that I loved. And I understood that for me, bottom was that if I love you, I'm going to hurt you, and there's not a damn thing I can do about it.
Mm.
And that's about as, for me, that's about as powerless as I can get.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always come in a can. That's a piece of things. So that's where I had really understood that I was going to require a spiritual solution to fix that whole thing.
Yeah. I think I've heard Don P. He's speakers and tapes and stuff out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I uploaded a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he went to Russia, as a matter of fact, the first group that he was serving as trustee at large at the time, and part of a 4-man team that went to Russia. Was Soviet Union at that time in the late 80s there.
Yeah. To carry the message?
Yeah. And I'm, oddly enough, I'm sponsoring a guy that's doing a new translation of the Russian Big Book, and I'm going to Russia.
Are you?
At the end of April.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. So,
nice.
So anyway, there's that thing. So, okay. Now, that's unfolded in a lot of ways over the years. But finally, what happens is that in late February of 2018, I'm sitting in my oncologist's waiting room, and I get an email from my brother. And my brother says, my brother, the good guy, he's forwarded this to me. Says here, hello, Mike. Your brother, Robert Lorenz, gave me your email address and said that you might be able to assist me. I'm fairly new to Ancestry.com and new to the search for my biological family. Ancestry matched Robert and I as having a, quote, close family DNA relationship, either him as my grandfather or uncle. So far, this is the only close DNA match for me. I'm a 47-year-old woman. My parents adopted me from Catholic Charities out of Sacramento, California. I was born in February of 1971. I have a family tree started, but it's all for my wonderful adoptive family. I'm curious to learn more about my biological family tree, and I would appreciate any information you might have. I would also like to say that I've had a good life and a loving adoptive family. I'm happily married and have one amazing 13-year-old daughter. I'm grateful to my biological parents for making what I'm sure was not an easy choice and ensuring that I've had a good life. I'm curious about my biological roots and any available medical history. I'd like to be able to provide that information to my daughter for her benefit. I want to be sensitive to the fact that the story of my birth might not be known or shared, and I don't want to cause my biological parents and their families any distress. Thank you again for your assistance. Best regards, Joey, and then her last name.
Getting tingles on the back of my neck.
And there's some back and forth, and I emailed Joey and talked, and then we eventually had a phone conversation, and she sent me photographs, and it was pretty clear from the Ellen was a a redhead, and that's her family was. And anyway, it was
There's
clear.
resemblance.
And then I went and had the DNA test done, and bingo, I've got a daughter,
47-year-old daughter.
and a granddaughter. And I'm always reminded I've got a favorite son-in-law now too. And those were gifts that I never thought I would have.
Yeah.
Because at the time, rightfully so, when she returned from having that baby and placing it for adoption, she wouldn't even tell me whether it was a boy or a girl, and and anything else. And she just asked that I leave her alone and her family alone, which I did for all these years. Now, as Joey and I began to talk, she, of course, wanted to know, well, who's my mom? And I explained, I said, I think I know where I know. Of course, I know who she is, and I think I know where I might locate her. But here are the reasons I haven't for all these years. And so we talked, and I agreed that I'd write her, Ellen, a letter and see what she'd wanted to do. And so here's the letter that was written. Dear Ellen, please forgive my intrusion after all these years. Last week I received the following email, and then that was the email I read you. Since receiving this email, I've been in contact with Joey via email, text, and an extended phone conversation. The details she's given me, including photos and her DNA match with my brother Bob as her uncle, have convinced me that she's almost certainly the child that you placed for adoption. She's an amazing woman who is especially grateful that you provided her with a chance to grow and thrive with her adopted family. Connecting with her is a blessing, a piece of grace that I never expected to receive. Our conversation made it clear to Joey. I made it clear to Joey that it was your courage and principles that made her life possible. I told her that I treated you horribly without equivocation. My treatment of you is the most shameful thing that I've done in my life, and whatever you may say to her won't be too harsh. Joey knows only that your name is Ellen. Should you choose, here are the ways you can contact her. And I listened. Joey understands and will respect your decision if you decide not to connect, but ask that you let one of us know so she won't be in limbo. If this has awakened memories and feelings about the harm I did to you and your family that you'd like to discuss, you can reach me in the following ways. I pray that you're enjoying a wonderful life. And about a few days later, I was driving and got a call, and it was Ellen. And I had a chance to make amends. She said, "You're an AA, aren't you?" And I said, "Huh?" She says, "Well, I recognize the lingo." She said, I've got a son that's 8 years sober."
Oh, wow.
And what you don't know, and I go to open meetings with him from time to time, so I hear that talk. See, people listen to us. And she said, the other thing you don't know is that all of my brothers have died of alcoholism, all three of them. And so we had a conversation, some amends were made, and she got connected with Joey, and I got to clean up that piece with her. Since she got rid of me, she's done very well. She's been married the same guy for 45 years now, and has 2 children with him, and so a lot of healing's taken place.
Yeah,
but,
I love that. I just love it. It makes, as you're talking to me, I get a physical reaction to certain stuff, and it's like a juice thing that I don't know what it is. But as you're reading that letter, I get this tingling feeling in my neck, and I always get it. It's the back of my head and my neck. And I like it. It feels really good. But there's some kind of, it's where I know that I'm like being touched by the magic.
Yeah. Well, here's the funny thing. I got that, and it was a Wednesday. I was sitting in the doctor's office. That Friday, I was flying to Sacramento, within 15 miles of where she lives, to do a workshop for some men up there.
Of course you did.
Yeah. That had been scheduled, a year in advance with no knowledge of any of this.
Right.
I'm plunked down.
God, I love that stuff.
Yeah. Now, I didn't actually get to see her that trip because she was off on spring break with her daughter,
Yeah.
But I did get. We've been together face to face 4 times since.
Wow.
And I was talking at a speaker meeting in Sacramento last August, and I'd let her hear some recordings and stuff. So it says, you're welcome to come on if you want to. And this is sort of kind of what she had no experience with Alcoholics Anonymous. So
yeah.
So, if you want to come, you can. If you don't, that's fine. And she's, I think that's okay. I'll come. And she was sitting there, so I got to end my talk in Sacramento by going, and here's Joey,
Very cool.
On the front row. And the speaker line to thank her was longer than my speaker line. There are it turns out there are a lot of kids from families and women who have given up children for adoption and so forth, that it was another piece of healing for all of us.
Yeah. Man.
And she said, she says, Mike, she says, the only thing I feel bad about is, she says, I'm sorry it took us 47 years to connect. And God gave me the words that said, honey, it took about 47 years for God to make me worth connecting with. Nice. I'm so glad you missed the pain of some of those years.
Yeah.
And so forth. So now I've been elevated to the ultimate. She loves and respects her adoptive family as she should.
Yeah, did Ellen contact her?
Yeah, and so we've become. I'm pops now for the family, and we all get along well, and so forth. So that's about it for me today.
Yeah, that's a magic story. Those stories are all over the place, and I would really rather hear that than like a story. Yeah. I have one episode on here, and I did it really early, and I'm thinking the quality is not as good as what it is because I just faked it till I made it doing this thing. I had no idea what I'm doing. We just started doing it, and I don't know. I still don't know exactly what I'm doing. I'm hoping something else has got control because I never do. So I did one that was only my miracles, because that's what I would call that. Some people would say a promise. Yeah. It's these things that I like Brian says third party intervention. It comes in and puts things together and makes things happen that are really I don't know where they happen except for here in this recovery when you're operating under these principles. And that's an example of that story you just said about how that intersection at the right time, at the right, all that happened just exactly the way it's supposed to. And what's really, sometimes I don't realize it until I look back, right? But sometimes I feel it right now. I know, okay, it's almost like God has said, go. And so I do a podcast with nothing but my miracles, and I just run through them.
My sponsor, current sponsor, often says that life is fired at us from point blank range, but only understood in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, I love that.
That's pretty much the way it is.
Yeah. Can you tell me who he is? Who is your sponsor?
Bob B. from St. Paul. With Don and I, Don M. and I share the same sponsor.
Yeah.
I had another sponsor for a number of years, but he passed, and I asked Bob to pick up that burden.
Yeah. When we get off here, I'm going to get his last name because I want to know who it is. Well, Mike, I really appreciate you coming in and spending some time with me. I would like to. I mean, that book over there that you got looks like it has a lot of this kind of thing in it. Another thing, I would like to have more of you. I think you've got probably a lot to unpack that would be valuable to people. It sounds like you do a lot of speaking and workshops and things.
Yeah, I tend to prefer the. Of course, I do some podium speaking, but I really enjoy the workshop weekends because they allow more for relationships to develop. That we can do a session or two, and you and I can go have a cup of coffee in the corner and unpack some stuff and have more of a relationship. So
kind of like a retreat atmosphere where you get to where you actually can get to know each other and build some relationships during it rather than
that happened.
I like that too.
Yeah, that happened to me accidentally because the way I got to do anything at all was filling in for Don P. That his schedule was giant, and so when conflicts had come up, I'd get thrown in. All of a sudden, my first out-of-town gig was doing an entire weekend for some people in Santa Barbara. Which is not the way you normally start.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing weekends first and then going to the podium afterwards. So that's it.
Yeah, I like how you said it happened by accident. My father lives with me. He's 81. He and I are best friends, and we come out here work in his shop together. We turn wrenches together and do things, and I just love him. He's taught me a ton of things over the years, and he and I, my brother, built a log cabin out in Orange County, Indiana, near Patoka Lake 20 years ago.
Oh, okay.
What I didn't know was that we were building that because when I was about 17 months sober, my group was looking for a place to go and camp and have a retreat. And I had a place. Now, that place was built on alcohol and that kind of thing 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But now I have men come down there and have retreats. And in May, I usually do it in May. May was my 6th one, men's retreat.
Wow.
Like I said, just now 5 years sober. That's an accident, like you said. I invited some guys to come down. We had on a Saturday night meeting, we had 32 men camping out in a circle around the bonfire, sharing what's going on with them and talking and doing this and doing that relationship building thing you were talking about, where we get to know each other. We cook food on the fire, and just by accident, one of our members is a professional chef.
Oh.
So he helps with the food because he's used to like cake, because I'm not used to cooking for that many people. And we bring potluck kind of stuff and do that. And also one of the things that I do, that, again, I didn't know that God was lining this up, is that's where I take a guy for a fifth step. And we go down there and spend the night. And I have them we do fifth step. We cook some supper.
Yeah.
Sit in a log cabin. No cell phones, no electricity, no running water. It's comfortable but primitive. Yeah. And we do a fifth step, and then I have them do 6 and 7 as I go to bed. And I can go to sleep on a dime, so they don't have to worry about me hearing them. I tell them, and if something they need me, holler. I'll wake up, and they do 6 and 7. And I wake up with a guy in the morning that looks different than the guy that walked in the cabin the night before.
Yeah,
you see that shift in them, and it's just an honor to get to do it. And so many things like that. That's one, like on my miracle list thing that this. I didn't know I was going to be doing this and carrying this message to people. I had no idea. I didn't plan this. So this stuff happens, and we're full of stories, and I'd like to hear some more of yours. The other thing I will tell you is that this stuff is portable. I am willing to come to you. So I can pack up these 2 microphone stands and that computer, and I put them in that in that green bin. That's where they live, so they don't get any dust on them, and go to other people's houses and go, so that I don't, you not necessarily have to come to me. Okay. So that's a invitation and an offer, and I would like to hear more, because you've touched me today.
Well, I was with taught to. This is kind of my traveling briefcase here, and as you might have guessed, I don't. I come from a tradition where we do multiple fifth steps because for the same reason, the police will ask you interrogate you more than once. Rarely does the truth come out on the first interrogation.
Right.
And
it's the old onion peeling thing.
Yeah. And, it wears down. For me, I get behind the ego. Eventually, the truth slips out. I can keep the act up for a short period of time, and then, okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. But so we... I was taught and believe that inventory that we write is God has a recycling plan. See, I go out with my good intentions and trying to live life. I produce garbage. Essentially, I hurt people. I do things. I don't. But if I'm willing to write about it and place this in God's hands, it then can be recycled into an instrument of healing for somebody else. And that's my responsibility. So, I try and keep at hand a few pieces of things that are can be useful to others.
Yeah.
And, so I'll essentially have, why the hell should I bother, writing this goddamn inventory? This and that, and the other thing. And here, because it's transformative. It's not transformative because I learned new stuff about me. That's okay. But see, I can't use, the mistake is that if I try and use that information to change myself, because I can't. The inventory is to convince me of the futility of trying to change myself.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact,
I like that.
The Oxford group did what we would call a fourth step before they did a third step.
Oh, really?
Yes. You got to know. And the Oxford group's, quotes, third step prayer was, God, I've made a terrible mess out of my life trying to run it myself. Would you take it and run it for me? Now, Bill got more flowery and so forth. But see, after examining, they would have somebody examine their life. Say, okay,
I see.
Here it is.
Yep, I really have made a mess.
Yeah. And the question I was asked is, well, okay, Mike, the time I started this, I'm in my late 30s. Look, if God gives you another 30, 40 years, do you really think over time you're going to do any better than you've done already? Didn't you want to not hurt people just as much in the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I do, what it is, it's a tool to really drive home my powerlessness and unmanageability. Because until the idea that somehow I can fix myself, I can improve myself, whatever, I can do it for a short period of time.
I can't even see myself.
Yeah.
Not accurately.
So that's whole the point. That's why we're heading down the line, That's why don't drink and go to meetings is only a place to start, not a place to land.
Yeah.
If you're alcoholic of my variety.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I'm right in tune with you.
I just ran on for another 20 minutes here.
And I like it. I it's a gift to me when I get to have somebody talk to me and tell me stuff, because everything I learn, and I have avenues that allow me to grow, and I know I can't do this, that other thing about right? I can't do any of this on my own, and some of that power greater in me is you and the other group, and the people that are doing things that I should, I take note of. Teachers are everywhere, so I enjoy listening to you, and it really is a gift to me. It is. To be able to do this and to have people take their valuable time to come and sit in this little wood shop in the backyard in New Albany, Indiana, and chat a little bit.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed it very much, and thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Well, we'll close her up then. I have, I've kind of landed on some opening and closing remarks, and I like to do it. If you're not having a blast in your recovery, it's your own damn fault. And I want to just thank everyone for allowing me to participate in my recovery in this manner today. Peace out.
All your life and even before you knew you were meant for something much more than this broken world they pushed on you. Shot down cause you wouldn't conceive, buy into the shit they said to believe. Always felt there was something else you came to do. Now the new age is dawning, finding that you have so much to say. You are the one to bring it all together. It's time to lead the way. Doesn't matter what anyone thinks, just follow your heart, believe in your strength, hold on to your faith, see it through. Ain't your wisdom hidden inside? You got the magic, let it rise. People love nothing more than the truth. Now the new age is dawning, finding that you have so much to say. You are the one to bring it all together. It's time to lead the way. There's a little good in everyone, a mighty purpose to it